Hey everybody, welcome to the second talk of the Wildlife Summit here at VegFest UK Online, November the 14th, 15th, 2020. This is a number of talks and live presentations which you can find on vegfest.co.uk and also on our Facebook page, event page and other social media platforms. The Wildlife Summit today is co-hosted with Humane Wildlife Solutions and also Animal Aid. And on that note, I'd very much like to welcome Jade Emery today. Jade will be talking about Animal Aid and some of the work. So good morning, Jade. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Tim. Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Excited to share some info about the work we do.
Okay, well, just to say a very big gratitude to all of your team at Animal Aid. We all know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes to come up with, you know, the creative ideas, the input, the contacts, the work, the scheduling, the speakers, and you have put together a great program, Jade. So thank you all, and all on behalf of all your team at Animal Aid. You've been very supportive, and it's been great. So especially for this wildlife, because it's an area that often we don't, you know, take such a close look at, especially within vegan community, within the animal rights movement. And we had a fantastic talk with Kevin earlier, Kevin Newell from Humane Wildlife Solutions, which I heartily recommend you do. If you're listening, go and have a look at. It's on the VegFest site and platforms. So Joe, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to you to do your presentation, and then I think we'll drop back in. There may well be time for one or two questions. So if you're listening and there's anything you'd like to ask, you can ask your questions in the comments section. I think, Jade, you'll be able to answer them, if not during the talk, later on. You can email, indeed, Animal Aid with your questions, if you have any. Without further ado, Jade Emery from Animal Aid, thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jade. I work for Animal Aid, as you know. I run our wildlife campaign. I'm just here to talk a bit more about the work that we do specifically for wildlife. So Animal Aid is one of the longest established animal rights groups in the world, having been founded in 1977. We try and particularly stand up for those animals who perhaps aren't the most popular or like viewed as cute, as they need their additional support. So that would be animals such as grey squirrels, rats, and mice. We work on a few different campaign areas to help animals, ranging from campaigning against animal experiments, against horse racing, against farming and slaughter, and generally promoting a vegan lifestyle. While we work towards a world where no animals are exploited, we try and take a pragmatic approach to our work, to help us work towards our more long-term vision. This has meant taking on campaigns such as our CCTV and slaughterhouses campaign, which help to reduce suffering of animals with more immediate results. Animal Aid have had many successful campaigns. I'm currently displaying our 2019 achievements graphic. Not sure how readable that will be for you, but that's also available on our website if anyone wanted to have a closer look. We carry out some groundbreaking undercover investigations, exposing suffering of animals on farms, slaughterhouses, and game bird establishments. These frequently make the news, and our films are often viewed thousands of times across social media. We also send out lots of resources, including tens of thousands of leaflets, booklets, and other educational resources to help expose the suffering of animals. We carry out extensive political lobbying in order to help end some of the worst suffering that animals endure. We also respond to appropriate government consultations and often help and encourage others to do so too, to help speak out for animals and provide a formal and well-researched response to balance out some of the not so compassionate organizations that may respond, such as the shooting lobby. Our vegan pledge initiatives enable thousands of people to try cruelty-free living for a month. As you can see on the graphic, last year over 3,500 people took part, and our follow-up survey showed that just over half the participants intend to stay vegan. We also have an ethical shop that provides a great selection of cruelty-free products to help make a vegan lifestyle more accessible and to help fund our campaigning work. We attend vegan fairs all over the country. We also train volunteer school speakers who go to hundreds of schools every year to deliver talks and cookery demonstrations and educate young people about kindness to animals. We also produce all sorts of resources for schools, including DVDs, lesson plans, worksheets, and things specifically designed to promote cruelty-free living to younger people. Today I'll be focusing on our work involving wildlife. I'm our main wildlife campaigner, but our wildlife work does cross over with a couple of other campaigns areas. My role at Animal Aid focuses on campaigns such as our grey squirrel campaign and our wider anti-culling campaigns at the moment. We also have more in development, so do keep an eye on our website and social media. A couple of my colleagues also work on wildlife issues, including our anti-shooting campaign and campaign against reindeers being used in Christmas events. I'll go through each of these and explain a little bit more about them and actions you can take to help. One of our most prominent campaigns over the past few years has been about grey squirrels. This involves trying to change the negative perception that some people have, dispelling some of the myths about them, that they kill red squirrels, that they kill birds and eat their eggs and cause loads of damage to trees. This is so important because these myths are so closely connected to the dangers that these animals face. This is true of many animals. Grey squirrels are culled on a huge scale and face less legal protection than others because of some of these myths and negative attitudes towards them. The same is also true of mice and rats, who have a somewhat negative reputation, leading them to be treated with less compassion by many people. Grey squirrels are not only culled in large numbers, but they also faced a new threat this year. New rules meant that the licenses to release these squirrels back into the wild have been revoked. So that means if they are injured or orphaned, they either face a life in captivity or being euthanized when they may have been able to have been nursed back to full health. Grey squirrels are blamed for all sorts of crimes, but in reality, many of these are far overblown myths. In the past, red squirrels were culled in absolutely huge numbers and referred to as pests. But now they're seen as so precious that some people deem it necessary to cull grey squirrels in a misguided attempt to protect them. This shows how changing attitudes and perceptions can have a huge impact on the lives of wild animals. There's a lot more to say about grey squirrels, but I'll keep it fairly brief because we have the fantastic Natalia from Urban Squirrels on at 3:30 to talk a bit more about this. So do make sure you tune into that one. We understand that even when people have lots of compassion for wildlife, they can still have issues when they're present in spaces where they are not necessarily welcome. You would have heard a bit more about this in the previous talk with Kevin, but examples would include mice and rats in people's houses, squirrels in the loft, foxes or moles in the garden, things like that. We've produced a series of information sheets which are available on our website, or we can also post out physical copies to people who don't have internet access. They give people in-depth advice on how to effectively and humanely deter wildlife without causing them any harm. We also work with any individuals or organizations who are maybe tempted to take lethal action against these animals and try and help them explore humane methods, or in some cases recommend the services of an organization such as Humane Wildlife Solutions, who you saw earlier, or Foxagon, who were also mentioned earlier, who can provide expert help in non-lethal deterrence. We campaign against a wide range of wildlife culls, such as the previously mentioned grey squirrel cull, and the arguably more well-known badger cull and others like that. In the past, we've managed to reach out to organizations such as golf clubs and supermarkets and persuade them against planned culls and to instead commit to trying humane methods. Other than the cruelty, One of the strongest arguments we have against culling is that it is simply not effective. In many cases, culling can result in no change to the population or an actual increase in the numbers of the animals that those who carried out the cull were actually trying to get rid of. This is because often only the older and weaker animals are culled, and the survivors may then increase their breeding due to newly available resources, which would previously have been taken up by those who were culled. In cases where mice or rats are killed, if the area remains desirable, they'll probably quickly be replaced by others of the same species who are seeking out a comfortable place to reside. Making changes to deter animals is far more humane and effective, and we try and get this point across to as many people as we possibly can. With culling, some cases are far more complex than others. We believe that further research and exploration is urgently needed into how we can coexist with animals without anyone ever resorting to culling. People all over the world manage to coexist with bears and lions living nearby, but sometimes people can resort to culling animals such as foxes or wild boar because of a real or perceived danger. With animals such as wild boar and deer, or even mice and rats, when the issues are wide scale, there needs to be more of an appetite for humane solutions before these solutions can actually be discovered. And that's not always the case when animals are a bit less popular. Treatment of animals can vary for many reasons. And native or non-native status is one of the largest factors. It's really odd to consider that of this year, it's now illegal to release grey squirrels into the wild, but legal to release non-native game birds to be shot. The numbers we're talking about were on average of about 700 rescued grey squirrels being released back into the wild versus millions of non-native game birds. Non-native animals can also be afforded less legal protection than their native counterparts simply because of their origins, even when they existed here for hundreds of years, as grey squirrels have. Animal Aid do campaign against game bird shooting. Each year, around 50 million pheasants and partridges are purpose-bred for the shooting industry, and this leads us on to a bit more info on our anti-shooting campaign. Thousands of pheasants and partridges used for egg production are confined for their whole lives, their whole productive lives, in cruel metal battery cages known as raised laying units. Grouse are also classified as game. Around 500,000 of them are killed every year in Britain for sport by some of the wealthiest and most influential individuals. The sport does not just harm the birds who are being shot. Any wild animal deemed to be a threat to the survival of grouse, including stoats, weasels, or even raptors such as hen harriers, red kites, or golden eagles, are legally or sometimes illegally trapped, snared, or poisoned. In order to create a landscape for feeding and sheltering the grouse, ecologically precious blanket bog is also burned and drained. Our undercover investigations have found horrific living conditions in these battery cages used to produce birds for the shooting industry. While we, of course, would like to see an end to this horrific blood sport for good, Animal Aid is calling for a ban of use of battery cages for pheasant and partridge production. We're also campaigning to end all public subsidies to the grouse shoots and the introduction of state licensing for shoots and gamekeepers, with the retention of such licenses being dependent on the licensees staying within the wildlife protection laws. Last year, we captured footage from a game bird hatchery in Warwickshire, which showed hatching and live chicks being tossed into a macerator, which is a high-speed grinder. In the film, you can clearly see chicks hatching out of eggs just before they are being thrown into a macerator. The film also shows hatched chicks, presumed to be unsuitable for selling, being thrown into the machine. At a second game farm, trays of eggs are seen being loaded into the macerator, but are not even being checked for signs of life. Yet on the audio, you can hear chicks cheeping, and close-ups of the trays show birds moving around. Shockingly, killing live birds in this way is not illegal. By law, farms are allowed to kill chicks in this way until they are 72 hours old. At the first location that I mentioned, the footage covers a whole day inside the hatchery, where trays and trays of chicks are taken out of incubators and sorted onto a production line. At the end of the conveyor belt, the chicks are loaded into boxes to be sold to game farms or shoots to be used as feathered targets for shooters. The footage also shows chicks being dropped on the ground, getting stuck in the machinery, and being kicked out from under the conveyor belt. Eggs that are not yet hatched are tossed into the macerator. We also witnessed some live chicks being thrown into the macerator. These investigations received significant news coverage and were featured in the Times. And Animal Aid called for an end to the production of birds for sport shooting. Another one of our campaigns, which is also included undercover work, which I'll go into in a bit, is our campaign against events which use reindeer. These events attract crowds of often noisy, excitable people, demanding interaction with nowhere for the reindeer to retreat to. This can cause great distress to these very sensitive animals. They're often transported up and down the country to be exhibited, and behind the scenes, they're unable to roam the vast distances that they would be in their natural environment. As herding animals, they roam, and some species migrate up to 3,000 miles a year, which is very different to the existence of those in captivity. And they are often kept by inexperienced handlers who fail to meet their needs and are often fed an inappropriate diet. Some of the research we've done has found previous Freedom of Information figures that have shown that from 2014 to 2017, a total of 571 reindeer were removed and imported to the UK from places such as Sweden, Finland, and Norway. As you can tell, these places have a very different climate to the UK. This can make these reindeer susceptible to a variety of diseases and pathogens. Some of the reindeer continue to perish from a range of generalized and often preventable issues, including parasitic, gastric, digestive issues, malnutrition, wasting, and nervous conditions. Reindeer have not officially been imported into the UK in recent years, but government figures show that there have been no recent recorded imports of reindeer into the UK because of recent incidents of chronic wasting disease, which has led to a voluntary ban on the import of reindeer. But if this new fad and trend of using reindeer as props for these Christmas events continues, they could end up once again being taken from their homelands and brought to the UK to be displayed in these kind of events. So we originally did our investigation in 2018 into the conditions that these reindeer were kept in. And last year, there was a reduction in the number of reindeer events that took place. There was just shy of 150 events that actually went ahead. And 59 of the events who used animals in 2018 did not use any animals in 2019. So it shows that we're collectively chipping away and having an impact. Animal Aid would ultimately like to see a ban of import of any further reindeer, and ideally the ones that are already here should be retired into a suitable sanctuary environment. We'd like to see all festive organisers opt for animal-free events. We have no idea how many reindeer there are in the UK in total, because there's actually no formal requirement to record this data. It would be conservative to estimate around 1,500, going by the number of keepers and events taking place. Some herds are actually breeding reindeer in the UK, though without a fresh influx of gene stock in the mix, this cannot go on indefinitely and should not go on indefinitely. Reindeer are also classed as a vulnerable species. And kind of oddly, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has obviously affected everything, has also made a large impact on the reindeer herding community, since the ban of large gatherings has resulted in no parades, and it's also now unlikely that any families will be making a trip to Santa's Grotto in order to follow social distancing rules. George Richardson, the owner of one of the largest herds in England, has reported a 95% decrease in bookings this year. This presents us with a great opportunity to encourage animal-free festivities in the coming years. Our extensive investigations at UK reindeer farms have uncovered some really shocking suffering. So this has included deliberate animal abuse, including reindeer being shouted at and kicked, poorly looking reindeers with raw, exposed skin, diarrhea, and skeletal abnormalities. Animals being displayed for hours on end under bright lights with significant noise and nowhere to retreat to. And this sort of environment is hugely stressful for these very sensitive animals. This investigation, along with pressure from both of our investigations, along with pressure from Animal Aid and the general public and our supporters, resulted in lots of events being cancelled over the past couple of years, or as I said before, events that did go ahead in 2018 and were not cancelled after our initial investigation did not repeat this. So there are a few things you can do to help with our campaigns, mainly kind of following our campaigns on our website and on social media and taking part in any actions that we have. So examples of these may be like sending postcards to people, writing to your MP, filling in government consultations, all using kind of guides and templates that we've put together. Keeping information to hand and sharing resources is also a really important way you can help. So our things such as our humane deterrence sheets or any leaflets, it's really useful to have them and to share them when appropriate. Do get in touch with us as well if you hear about any wildlife culls that are going on near you by any businesses, or if you know of any individuals that need help, even if it's just yourself. Do get in touch with us and we'll help as much as we can, or we can recommend another humane organisation if it's a particularly complex case. Also, just writing to your MP about any wildlife issues that you're particularly passionate about is a really good way to stand up for wildlife. And of course, I'm sure many of you watching already do, but just continue to live with compassion and treat all animals with that compassion. Thank you so much for watching. I think we have a bit of time left, so I'm happy to take a couple of questions. You can find out more about the work that we do on our website, so that's animalaid.org.uk, or if you have any specific questions that you don't want to ask right now, you can send me an email, so that's jade@animalaid.co.uk.
Okay, Jade, that was very interesting. I've been sat here listening to you in the background, and just to emphasise how important it is the work you're doing, because it's not work that's generally done. It's not very visible. It's really important to keep these campaigns sort of in the public eye and in the eyes of the lawmakers, the MPs. I know we've got our local MP, Kerry McCarthy in Bristol. It's fantastic. Fantastic supporter. I mean, every day is supporting a different social justice issue, and wildlife and animal issues is something I know that Kerry does try and raise and keep in the profile as much as possible. I believe too you've got some pretty high profile supporters too. But you know, Brian May has been a huge advocate for wildlife issues.
Yeah, especially badgers. Yeah.
Anyone else who's been supporting Animal Aid?
Well, of course, as we've got later, the fantastic Peter Egan is one of our patrons. He's a great supporter of wildlife, so we're excited to chat with him this afternoon, which will be brilliant. Yes, have all sorts of supporters. We're really lucky to have all the supporters that we do, famous or not. They are our main campaigning tool. Having all these people that follow our work and are willing to stand up for animals, it's really fantastic and priceless, really.
I think it's difficult for people to know what to do with wildlife. In my short 57 years on this planet, I think the figures are, since 1970 or something like, 55% loss of species and habitats and, wildlife. The declining wildlife numbers in the last 50 years is just horrific, really. What else can we do, basically? What is there? I think the one message we do all understand is that adopting a plant-based diet
absolutely
is a huge drop generally in resources, and the less resources we're using, the less negative impact we have on wildlife habitats, especially. Can you just emphasise that a bit more about how farming and agriculture impacts on wildlife?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I think most people, even if they do already have a plant-based diet, are not necessarily aware of the connections between wildlife mistreatment and eating meat and dairy. So an example would be like the badger cull. Badgers are culled in huge numbers against all scientific evidence because of failings of the dairy industry to prevent the spread of bovine TB. So instead, the badgers are scapegoated, and studies have shown that it's not an effective way to bring down these numbers. And the best way to stand up for badgers is to no longer support the dairy industry and give that up. Also, rainforest destruction, for example. So many animals have their habitats completely destroyed. So the animals can be farmed for meat, or so we can farm food that will then largely be used as animal feed.
I think that's something that some people, they're not aware of, is that a lot of the rainforest destruction is to produce soya, but only a very small amount of that soya is for human consumption. Unfortunately, most of that soya is produced. My understanding is that a lot of it's for oil, but only 20% of the soya crop is oil. The other 80% is really basic sort of fibrous, what effectively becomes cattle fodder. So there's a huge amount of soya in rainforest destruction, which is associated with animal consumption, and even the when you hear these sort of terms, like the marketing terms like grass fed, and obviously grass grows in the UK, so there is an argument for people to say, well, that grass grows and cows eat the grass. It's like, yeah, but they don't eat the grass in the winter because grass doesn't grow in the winter. So even with a summer of lush grass in the UK, there's a whole half a year or more where there's great basic grain fed. So even grass fed, it still has to be grain fed, and it's the grain that is such a destruction, I believe, really on habitats especially. Okay, well, I'm not sure if we've got a question or two for you. I think we've got a question to come up from one of the people listening. There's a question I've got to go. Here we go. It's about stink pits. That's quite interesting. So Flo Blackburn here asking a question. In shooting and trapping areas, how common are stink pits full of dead birds and mammals, and why do they exist in the first place?
I'm definitely not the best placed person in Adelaide to answer this, but I'll do the best I can, definitely. But I'm sure we have more information on the website, or if you wanted to get in touch. My understanding is that they exist to attract other mammals for trapping so that they can then be killed.
Right, that's present thing. And of course, it has been in the news recently, the grouse shooting and the hunting. I mean, we've seen, for some reason, council grants for lockdown, and even government exceptions for grouse shooting. It's the most bizarre set priorities one could imagine, really. What do you think? This is perhaps something. I mean, you mentioned MPs. I think one of the feelings a lot of us feel, well, look, we can help farmed animals because we can go vegan. We can help animals in being used for clothing by rejecting those consumer lifestyle choices. So we can make a kind of very positive statement for animals every day with our lifestyle choices. But when it comes to things like wildlife and such like, apart from having a humane approach for controlling, some of the animals that come into our lives that perhaps we don't want to share our lives with, that we discussed with Kevin in the Humane Wildlife Solution talks, things like sort of ants, we talked about wasps and various other creatures that but I think, what would you like to see from government that would really make an impact? What should we be demanding from government?
Yes, that's a huge question, but in reference to culling, just more of a focus on trying humane methods. I mean, it is a current requirement under the current general licenses for shooting birds and things like that, but we just don't see enough of it. We know, from experience that humane methods are more effective and can work, most of the time. There aren't that many scenarios where they might not be effective, and there are always combinations that you can try, but there just doesn't seem to be much of a focus or desire. I also mentioned animals such as mice and rats. There just doesn't seem to be this research into alternatives to kind of resolve issues on a wide scale. So they're just poisons are used, whereas if maybe they were a more kind of well-liked animal, there would be more of an appetite and more funding for that kind of research. More research and more of a focus on making sure that humane deterrence methods are implemented and are tried.
Presumably, small scale organic farming, with local produce for plant-based options would be such a fantastic move from the government, instead of continuing to prop up the dairy industry and such like. So subsidies would be another one, because I know there's one or two questions about people, what can they do to help campaigns? And I would still certainly say that the one thing that underpins this is we need to shift to a plant-based diet and produce locally grown, things like, oat milk is a classic example where we've got such but a huge proportion of oat milk is shipped from 1,000 miles away in a Tetra Pak with 3% oats, 97% water. Whereas if the subsidies were going into UK grown, which there's a fledgling growing sort of UK as a plant-based milk industry growing up around oats in the UK, which are fabulous to see. So I would say that's obviously still a big thing you can do, is to keep pushing for plant-based options wherever we can, and then adopting a vegan position where we understand animals have a right not to be used, and try and always seek solutions to that do not use animals. On that note, I know we're going to wrap up fairly soon. We've got a couple of other questions, and I'm just going to ask you about one very interesting one. I know that high-profile gentleman, George Monbiot, who is, pretty much plant-based and does talk a lot of sense, and would definitely be an ally to wildlife in particular. Famously sort of went on TV and then proceeded to kill and eat a deer, which wasn't the most vegan solution. However, I think you did touch on a point that I think a lot of people perhaps don't know the answer to, is that deer, and culling, where would we find more information about that? Where would you guide people to learn more about it? It's obviously a big topic, and I'm not going to be able to answer in 2 minutes, but where would you guide people, Jade, to learn about that aspect?
About deer in particular?
Yeah.
Books written by people like John Bryant, fantastic. We have a little bit on our website, but as you say, deer are a very kind of tricky one, and I kind of touched on it earlier. That's an example of where we do really need to be putting in the time and the effort into researching alternatives.
It's a tricky one. There are conflicts. I mean, there's another conflict that I'm actually going to be asking our animal rights panel, which is about, there's a conflict, for instance, with badger culling. I mean, the solution to badger culling, which I hear put forward, of course, is vaccination. But, of course, in order to have an effective vaccination, there may well be I wouldn't say a requirement, but there may well be a number of animals that would then be tested in laboratories. So, it is an area of conflict that we're not always able to resolve. I think that's an important thing, but I think also we should be open and honest about these discussions. I know there's time, we've just got time for another question. There's a question about actually specifically somebody asking about what we can do to help campaigns. I know you have said that already.
If you just go to our website, sorry.
Yeah, here you go. Oh, Kevin. Well done. Kevin's fantastic. Just asked this.
So the main thing would be to check out our website and social media, and we have a specific page on our website on actions you can take right now, such as using like letter templates or ordering resources, which we're mainly not sending out at the moment due to the COVID situation, but we can send them out in future and send out digital resources as well at the moment. But yeah, just kind of keep an eye on our website and social media and take any actions that you can. Also, becoming a member is a great way to help, and it's a great way to stay in touch. You'd receive our magazine, which keeps you up to date with our work. But but please, if anyone does have any more questions, do get in touch with me.
All right, well, look, I think we've got one more. Thanks for that. There you go, animalaid.org.uk. That is have I got that correct now? I think I got the wrong.
That's it, yeah.
UK on the end. I think I sort of picked that bit up. I know we've got somebody interesting watching from Nepal right now who has asked a question.
Oh, wow.
That's Nepal. So do you look at animal? Well, Paul is actually in Ireland, but he's asking on behalf of somebody I think listening in from Nepal who's commented. Do you look at animal welfare issues in other countries, such as Nepal?
Mainly, we do focus as a UK, slightly smaller UK-based organisation. We do focus on UK issues, but in cases where there are maybe organisations in the UK that are involved with some kind of culling or funding some kind of culling in another country, we might look into it and see what we can do there. But it would only be in kind of very particular cases. We do mainly focus on the UK.
I like that, I must admit. I think it's really important to look in our own backyard. I think one of the problems actually is that we've seen in the past is that people have tended to be very quick to
judge other
different countries. So it's not to say we shouldn't be raising awareness of all, but it is important that basically look in our own country and what we're doing, and particularly about our own behaviour. Because, behaviour starts with ourselves, and it's important to learn and educate and condition, train ourselves and discipline ourselves to walk with, the least impact on wildlife, on the environment, and try and benefit by the way we carry ourselves. So it's, very much responsibility starts at home with ourselves, and then really what's going on around us. But it is important too to be able to, I think, provide good tools and resources to develop the different countries around the world, especially where animal rights and veganism is developing. It's quite a new concept. that's something I hope very much to achieve over the coming months and years, actually, is to really produce some of the stuff that we've had the benefit of, like a really good 50 years now of animal rights, vegan development, and summits and conferences and such like. And I think to be able to now share the benefits of our knowledge that we've accumulated in the last 50 years is going to be something that we should do. So in answer to that question a bit about specifically Nepal or other countries, is that I think animal aid, what I'd love to see is being able to produce more materials that can be translated, that can be accessed and shared around a growing global vegan community, which the pandemic has had so many negative impacts. But one of the positive impacts it has is the development more of online resources for campaigners.
Absolutely.
This is free and easily shared. And there's a fabulous sort of DIY concept too, that you can do it yourself. You can get up and make yourself a really good program. We are and share it. And it's not hard. It takes effort and time and commitment. Jade, it's been fascinating. Thanks ever so much. I know we've got another talk in on sort of fairly soon with Ian Green from Animal Aid, your current CEO of Interest. So we need to get ready for Ian. So we'll wrap up there. Just to say, if you're listening, you're very welcome still to ask questions on the Facebook page. I'm sure Jade will be attending to them later on today. And until that point, thank you very much. Jade, thank you for your contribution and for all the work you've done today, because it's been a fabulous looking summit. We're sort of coming up halfway through it. Thank you ever so much. Okay.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, we'll see everyone later on.